Happy December, Senior High family. We are so excited that you're joining us for Senior High Online this week. As we start our Christmas series, we have a great message in store for you that's a great reminder that God is with us during the mountaintops and the valleys of life. Let's dive in.
As we start this new series, we're going to be looking at the different ways that God is with us. We know that God is always with us, but how do we experience Him in different situations in life? And as we look at the Christmas story, which we've heard many times, most of us, how do we actually live in the reality that God is with us? When I was in middle school, I had a mountaintop experience. So all through middle school and growing up, my sister was the all-star athlete. She played volleyball. She always played on the varsity team in high school. She went on to play college volleyball. My parents were both volleyball coaches. So naturally, volleyball was at the center of our family. So it was always going to volleyball tournaments on the weekend. It was always going to games throughout the week. And when I was in middle school, my sister ended up going to college. And so I had a lot more time with my parents. And so when I was playing basketball one winter, I was really excited because all my family was going to come watch me play basketball, including my sister who was going to come back from college to watch. I was super excited for this. And so we were warming up for my first game, and I kept looking in the stands to see who was there, and my parents were there and my grandma was there, but not my sister. And so we started the game, and throughout the game, I kept checking the stands to see who was there and continued to not see my sister there. And so we went into our second game, and as we were warming up, I kept looking in the stands, seeing if she was there, and she wasn't there. And we went through the whole day, and she ended up not being there. The thing is, I was super excited. This was going to be a mountaintop experience for me to have my whole family there watching. But things didn't quite turn out, and I'll tell you what happened to my sister in just a little bit. But the thing is, throughout our life, we enjoy the mountaintop experiences. We love going to camps and retreats where we experience God in a powerful way, and then we return to reality. Or we have great holidays where everyone's together and we get to be enjoying each other. But then reality hits and we go back to normal life. And so what happens in those times we're not on the mountaintop? And in this series, as we look at how God is with us, it's important to realize that God is always with us, even in the valleys. In the valleys of life, when loneliness hits, when depression hits, when we feel anxious, when the burden of school or everyday life hit us, how do we experience God in those moments? Because we love the mountaintop. We love to experience the good times in life, but the reality is that each one of us is going to experience valleys. And the truth is, students, that we may enjoy God on the mountain, but we get to know God in the valley. We enjoy the goodness of God while we're on those mountaintop experiences when everything is going right, but it's in the valleys that we actually get to know who God is. We get to know His heart for us. We get to work through the struggle with Him by our side. And so as we look at this series about God being with us, how do we experience God and get to know Him in the valleys? Because you might not be in a valley right now, you might be experiencing a mountaintop, but I think many of us, especially with the kind of year that it's been, have experienced a valley where loneliness comes in, where we actually feel depression or anxiety, where we're separated from our friends, we don't get to go to school like normal. Some of us aren't able to come to church and be together in church like we have been. And so for many of us, this last few months have been a valley. And so what does it look like for us to experience God, to know God in the valley as well as the mountaintop? And there's this passage in the Psalms where King David writes about his struggles with God. In this passage, he's wrestling with God. He's saying, God, I know you're there. I experience you on the mountains, but right now I'm in the valley. And he writes this beautiful passage to us. Check it out. In Psalm 84, it says, blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set upon pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. King David says this as they pass through the valley of Baca. And in those times, when they talk about the valley of Baca is also translated the valley of weeping or the valley of tears. He's talking about going through hard times. As we pass through the valley, they must have had an image like this, where it's dry and it's barren. There's not much life there. And oftentimes, as we go through the valleys of life, it feels like there's no life, there's no water, there's nothing living. We don't get to experience joy like we do on the mountaintop. But the psalmist, David, writes this, that as they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. That even as they pass through the dry places in life, they make the springs well up. That God is by their side in the valley. And it also says this, the autumn rains cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. And I love that part where it talks about going from strength to strength. Because oftentimes in the valley, you think you'd go from the mountaintop experience being strong, life going good, everything's in order, to a valley where doesn't seem to be any strength. There doesn't seem to be any hope. But it says in the valley, they go from strength to strength. When I was in college doing track, one of the guys on our team, his name is John. And John was the biggest dude we had on the team, the strongest guy we had on the team. And each one of us loved to have John lifting with us because John could always push us to be better. And one time we were doing a workout where we started with pretty heavy weight, did as many reps as we could on the bench until we couldn't anymore, then started taking weight off, do as many reps as we could until we couldn't do anymore, take more weight off, until we were just doing the bar. And I had John spotting me. Here's a picture of John and I at a track meet in college. John's right here. Look how much bigger he is than me. And John was behind me, spotting me on the bench as I was trying to bench the bar. I must look like quite a wimp just doing the bar. But I did the bar as many times as I could, and John was spotting me each rep. And finally, I couldn't do anymore. The thing is, John wasn't paying attention. And so I actually let go of the bar, and John just kept lifting the bar up and down, not knowing that I had let go. And I love what the psalmist writes when he says you go from strength to strength in the valley. That when our strength runs out, we rely on the strength of God. It's kind of like John spotting us. That when we're not able to lift anymore, when we're not going to be able to take another step forward in life, when life seems like it's too much, God comes in with his powerful strength and does the work for us. And that's when we start to get to know God. And another thing the psalmist talks about is how we set our minds. He starts out the passage, he says, "What joy for those whose strength comes from the Lord, who have set their minds on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem." He says we need to set our minds on God. That God is the ultimate strength in our life, that God has us, that God knows the valley that we're walking through. He knows what we need. And when our strength runs out, we get to rely on him. When the loneliness comes in, we are not alone because God is with us. When the depression sets in, God's going to surround people around us that we need to help us. That when we set our mind on the things of God, we're able to walk through the valley. Because we may enjoy God on the mountaintop, but we get to know him in the valley. After the basketball tournament, when my sister never showed up, we drove home. And when we got home, on the counter was a note from my sister. It was a suicide note. And our family didn't know what to do with that. So we called the police. We started searching around our property looking for her. The police showed up. We started looking with them. And we went out to the barn. And my sister was in the barn with a knife. And she hadn't killed herself, but she was in a really tough place. So I went from this mountaintop experience where I was so excited to have my whole family watching me play basketball to a deep valley of finding out what's going on with my sister, the depression that she was experiencing. And while it was hard, our family learned so much through that process. We were able to get my sister help. We were able to know how we could come alongside her as a family. We had many hard conversations. The valley wasn't fun, But God was faithful in the valley, and his strength shone through in the valley. And so what is it for you? The mountaintops are great. And oftentimes, Christmas season can be a mountaintop experience, or it can be a valley. And so what does this Christmas look like for you? Are you missing being with people you're usually with? Have you lost family members that aren't with you this year? Has your family experienced financial troubles that have put a burden on the family like never before? Or are you experiencing the mountain? Are you enjoying that time when life is going good? Students, wherever you're at, whether you're in the valley or on the mountain right now, the truth is that, like the passage says, we all pass through the valley. But it doesn't say we stay there. It says we just pass through. There's that famous passage that's often read at funerals. It says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you're still with me. It says, even though I just walk through it, I don't stay there. I spend some time there, but I don't stay there because God carries us through it. And so this Christmas, as we think about God coming to earth, when the angel appeared to Mary and he says, you're going to name him Jesus because Jesus means Emmanuel, which means God with us. What does that actually mean for us? It means that we can walk through the valleys of life knowing that God's strength is going to come through. If we set our mind on him, if we actually press in to getting to know him in the valleys. Because God is with us, even in the valleys. So Father, we thank you for this time. We thank you that you are with us, that you know us, you know what we're going through, you know the valleys that we're in. And I pray for each one of these students and families and leaders that while they're in the valley, that they'd press into knowing you, that they'd spend time with you. And God, when our strength runs out, help us to rely on you and your strength to carry us through. So God, we give it to you. Teach us how to follow you. In your son's name we pray. Amen.